So Michael says the First Amendment applies to the internet, then wouldn't the other parts of the Constitution apply to modern day? And yes, that is the argument that the left refuses to acknowledge, that if the forefathers could not foresee the invention of machine guns, which by the way they had, rockets, which they also had, then we should not be allowed to have semi-automatic rifles and grenade launchers and things because they didn't know those would exist. But when you turn that back on them and say, well, then the internet does not apply to free speech because they had no idea the internet would be created, they kind of brush that off as a no, that applies because that's an individual right, not a right to a militia or military. So it's one of those circles that doesn't quite connect at the ends.
And we also have to remember that the First Amendment doesn't apply to private companies. When you use Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, it's a private entity. You do not get to really say whatever you want, and they're perfectly within their rights to censor you and disable your accounts.
Yeah, and it's the same thing on going on a private property. Perfect example, I carry a firearm when I'm out in public. There are some stores that do not allow that. The Sam's Club out here will not allow you to carry a firearm on their premises because it's private property. Same thing with banks. So because they own the land, they can say, no, you can't have that.
Mm-hmm.
But if they come into my house and they say, F you, get out, I can say, no, you don't have the right to say that to me because I own that property. It's the same concept with private corporations. So,
yeah. And about that, one thing to add, it needs to be fair. If you're going to enforce a political ideology or speech, it needs to be held to the same standards on both sides. It's not really fair to promote leftism and silence conservatives, and that's not really moral. And if you are going to do that, you need to be openly transparent about it and not just hide behind the shadows and do it. It's totally immoral. We've seen this a lot lately with conservatives on Twitter, and a lot of scandals have been coming out from Google and YouTube. I'm sure you heard all the famous conservatives talk about that.
Yep. As a matter of fact, last month, I think, Louder with Crowder got done with their lawsuit against, I think, YouTube, because they had demonetized them and said that they were under so many infractions and that they were going to be banned from YouTube. And they actually had to take that to court because they hadn't actually done anything wrong. They paid to have an ad made on YouTube, and then YouTube helped them make the ad. And then when they posted it, YouTube turned around and said, this is against our terms and policy. You're now banned and demonetized. So Michael asks, I have a question about net neutrality, which is one of the few issues I disagree with Ben Shapiro, because the internet allows for freedom of knowledge and isn't owned by a private company. I would propose the government enforce a minimum but rate for websites, but allow ISPs to increase the bit rate. I think I'm using the right terms. It sounds like you're trying to get at that online companies like YouTube, like Twitter and that kind of thing, can pay more towards a internet service provider to increase their bandwidth and increase their data so that their users can get the information faster and that kind of thing.
A fast lane, essentially.
Right, but that it should be regulated on the back end of that so that service providers can't be biased towards who they offer those services to. Is that what you're trying to ask? And as far as net neutrality goes, just generally speaking, when it was put into place, it actually really hurt the online market, and a lot of individuals saw that, especially if you were in a home and you had cable wired into your house. Yeah, a lot of people saw their rates go skyrocketing because literally what net neutrality did was say, okay, everybody has to charge these amounts. And what that did was that the little internet companies, for example, Virgin Mobile, they had their own internet service. They got pushed out of the market because they couldn't afford to do the same prices as all of the big internet companies. Like out here in Las Vegas, we have Cox, and in Texas we had Dish, and there's a few other ones, Cascom. So when you do that and you stifle the free market, you let all of the big ones that have most of the market anyway just inflate their prices because now they don't have any competition. And unfortunately, that was a result of net neutrality. A lot of people were scared of it because when they removed it, they said, well, now they're just going to ban certain websites and things like that. But actually, Cox Internet actually got sued by the makers of Riot, makers of League of Legends, because they were actually stifling the data consumption of anybody who played or had downloaded League of Legends on their computer. So they'd actually look in through and say, cool, this location downloaded League of Legends. Now we're going to throttle their speeds so that they don't have as much data. So didn't exactly go well for the internet provider. Riot won a pretty big lawsuit off of that, a couple of $1 million, which they actually turned around and gave to their players, which was pretty nice of them.
Mm-hmm. We have to remember that we rely on private companies to connect to the internet. They're providing us bandwidth, they're providing us with content, and we can't, we're not entitled to the goods and services of a company, right? So, and we also have to remember that getting rid of net neutrality will make it more competitive out there. Other businesses will be able to create new ISPs, and also think about all the different speed plans. Like Comcast has different tiers, and if your grandma, for example, like Ben Shapiro said, only uses a little bit of internet, she doesn't really need blazing fast speed, and she could save more money on her limited internet usage. We have to
Exactly.
We have to wait and see and let the free market do its thing, because government really isn't the answer. When we think about involving government, we have to think, is government really necessary for this policy? If it is, fine, let's do it. If it isn't, well, let's see. And this is going to be a great case to see. If it's successful, it's going to be a free market win. But I think California just established their own net neutrality rules, and I'm not sure how other states are following on to that. So it's not going to be a total free market because states are getting involved.
I think there's California and one more that did their own net neutrality laws, but that's because they only had one internet service provider in their entire state. So they just kind of went, well, we're going to regulate how much you can charge people. I've actually already seen quite a bit of savings because I have a 300 down, 30 up, and when net neutrality was in place, they would throttle me after my first 100 gigabytes. So I would not be receiving the service I'm paying for. Now I have a 1 month allotment, kind of like a cell phone plan, and it's 2 terabytes. So when I stream, play video games, when I'm watching YouTube, those add up. But even with all the stuff I do, I barely hit 2 terabytes in a month. So I'm not paying all that extra to keep every day after hitting 100 gigs to have my 300. So I'm not getting charged all that extra. And my overall price for my plan went down too. 2 years ago, I was paying $107 for the 300 down, 30 up. Now I'm paying $93 for the same thing, but we also have a premium cable package. So I'm paying $15, $20 less, and I've gotten more. And I'm not being charged extra when I hit that 2 terabyte. They just lower my speed down to a 150 from a 300. So that in itself is a blessing for me and several other streamers, gamers, and people who do podcasts like us. because it saves those pennies, and those pennies add up.
Yeah. Another important argument about net neutrality is that there is no competition out there. And it's very hard to argue with that because we don't want a few companies screwing us over. We want companies to be able to be created and compete. One company that starts up can say, hey, we're not going to throttle you at all. You get unlimited access to the internet. And then that's going to force all the other companies to follow suit. Case in point is with T-Mobile and then lowering the rate of their unlimited plans, right? It sent Verizon and AT&T to their knees. I think last February it was. Verizon started to bleed customers out like crazy, and that's amazing. I have a Verizon customer, and I seen my price go down a little bit, and I was like, whoa, this is a free market win.
Yeah, a close friend of mine actually works for T-Mobile, and I'm actually planning on switching over to them soon from Cricket because I'm paying $60 a month for kind of unlimited everything, but I don't have insurance on my phone. I don't have access to a lot of the stuff that you would with an actual service plan. And yeah, when I switch over, I'm going to be saving $15 a month, get a new phone for free, and all of these other nice things. So, but I used to be with Verizon, and when they started kicking their prices up, that's when I went to Cricket. So why do you think so much of the internet opposed the repeal of net neutrality if it would end up being positive? Generally speaking, I'd have to say it's probably the fear of change. A lot of people didn't see the effects of net neutrality when it went into place. It was kind of passed under the cover of night. But they just started seeing their rates go up, and they never thought much of it. So the publicity it got was very negative when they started about repealing it, because they said, well, if we don't control what they can do, they're going to do all of these sketchy, terrible things, and you're going to end up suffering because of that. That could happen in theory. The problem is, as soon as somebody goes, I'm going to charge you $300 and I'm going to block YouTube and Netflix, you're going to say, no, I'm going to go to somebody else, and then they're going to go out of business. So that half of the argument was ignored because people can be evil, people can be greedy, but the checks and balances we have in the free market are what stop that from happening. And when it does happen, sends them right out of business.
Yeah, people don't trust corporations, but on the other hand, we don't really have much competition out there to really make the free market work in this case. Where are you going to go? I mean, you're going to go to your data plan on your phone? I mean, that's pretty much your only alternative. Like in my area, it's AT&T or Comcast, and that's it. And that's, some people only have Cox, I think, in Midwest.
Yeah, I don't know how far it stretches, but Las Vegas and the surrounding cities, the only real internet provider we have is Cox. You can get some home wireless routers through cell phone companies and whatnot, but if you want TV, you pretty much have to go through Cox.